Hey friends, welcome back to She's At It Again. This morning we're going to be making chicken fried steak. Now you may be thinking, why are you making it in the morning? Do people eat that in the South in the morning? And they do, but I'm making this morning because we'll have this either tonight or tomorrow night. But this goes in the refrigerator and reheats beautifully. Now, quick story. When I was in college, I was bound and determined I was going to make something like I was grown up. Now, I was, of course, a beginner cook because I was only 16, 17 years old. But I would try to make chicken fried steak. I made the biggest mess. I don't know why. I kept trying it over and over again because it was just ridiculous how much of a mess I made. So much to clean up. But it never occurred to me that I could make this ahead of time when I wasn't quite as rushed for things to do by a deadline instead of waiting until the last minute. So 59 years old, I think I figured it out now a little more than I did then. So let's get started. This is my retro electric skillet. You could be jealous if you want to, because I would be if I was seeing somebody else with it. But a friend of mine was getting rid of this, about to put it in a garage sale, and she told me I could have it if I wanted it. And by the time she finished saying wanted it, it was in my car. So I'm quite excited about this electric skillet. And we are going to set this, let's see what my temperature is. I think I have this at 350. I have my cookbook out right here. Well, it says 360. Okay, so we're going to set our electric skillet to 360. I'm going to put just enough olive oil in here to cover the bottom, plus just a tiny bit more. So I'm not going to give you a measurement for olive oil because that really all depends on how big your electric skillet is. If you have one that's this tiny, one of those little apartment size ones, of course you're not going to need a cup of it. But if you have one of those big giant electric skillets, you're going to need a lot more. Okay, I'm going to put the lid on that just to let it retain the heat better for right now. And in a larger mixing bowl, we're going to put a cup of flour. So I'll get that out. This is just organic plain flour, organic flour. I guess all of it's unbleached, but if you don't have organic, please consider using unbleached, because bleached flour is just what it says. There's a bleaching agent in it, and it's not something you actually want to eat. So it's just for shelf stability for the supermarket. Now to that, I know this looks like breakfast cereal, and it's really not. I made saltines yesterday. Actually, I made 2 giant saltines, and it's pretty funny. It looks like, I mean, it's giant. It covers a sheet pan almost. Anyway, but the dough makes enough to where I could put it on 2 different sheet pans to make it super thin. I thought it'd make it real crispy, and I didn't burn it. I didn't even over brown it, but these are just really hard, and they're not light and flaky like store-bought ones, but the store-bought ones are like $6 a box, and I just can't bring myself to do it. If I find them at a good price, I'll buy organic saltines, but otherwise, I'm just making my own. So what you want to do is take 1 sleeve of those saltines, but it would equal about a cup, I'm guessing. So add those crushed saltines. Now, when I say crushed, I don't mean like powder fine. I mean left in chunks like this. So if you can see that well enough, and of course I drop them on the counter. You want them to be in little pieces, about like chunky granola, I guess, is my best description of it. And the reason being is because once we press this into the cube steak, which is the meat we're using, it's going to hold it apart. It's going to keep that cube steak opened up and flat, as opposed to drawing back up, which is what happens if you just use flour. So put your crushed saltines in the bowl, and let's see, a half a teaspoon of baking powder. Now this is baking powder with no aluminum in it. I think Rumford is the brand I use, but I just put mine in a jar because it was running low. I can hear my oil heated up now. We need a teaspoon of salt, So this is a 1/2 teaspoon measure. Half a teaspoon of fresh ground black pepper, and I ground this in here the other day. And 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Now, if you don't like things real spicy and you're afraid of the cayenne, by all means don't use that much. Just use a tiny bit of it. That is simply for seasoning. In a smaller mixing bowl, we are going to put an egg. You can use 2 eggs if you have smaller eggs, but I have pretty large eggs, so I'm going to use 1 egg. I have my drying napkin over here and just out of camera range. Beat that egg a bit. And about 3/4 of a cup of milk. And beat the mixture of egg and milk together where it doesn't have chunks of egg in it. Now we're going to take and just stir this with our tongs. And this is really chunky. You're going to look at this and go, I'm not sure about that. But yeah, trust me on this one. Sometimes I still make chicken fried steak with just flour and stuff, and it's fine. I mean, the taste is fine. But when I have the time, when I make the time and make this ahead of time, it's really, really worth it. All right, so this is our cube steak. Let me get a good picture of that. That's what it looks like. And there are 4 cube steaks in this package. That's normally what they come in unless you get a big giant package of them. And I remember as a kid, my mother used to make cube steak a lot. So my guess is that it was not very expensive, but that's not really the case now. It's not a cheap cut of meat, but this package was $7.22, so it's not like you're breaking the bank by it, but still, it's more expensive than buying some things. All right, first thing you want to do is, I know you think put it in the wet ingredients, but we're going to put it in the dry ingredients first. Just enough to get it coated. Then put it in the egg and milk mixture. Just enough to get it wet on back and front. And then put it back in here. Now this last step with each one of these, you're going to take and press the mixture into the steak. And it's going to make it spread apart pretty big. So you may only be able to cook 2 of these at a time in your electric skillet. Press the mixture down, flip it over, and make sure you've covered all the wet areas with the flour and saltine mixture. And you don't want a bunch of pieces floating around in your oil, so I think our oil is heated up enough. I can hear it sizzling. We're going to lay this down in there. And I think you can see that from the lower camera. Maybe if I scoot it back, you can see it from the upper camera. How about that? I think I've said before, I have plug mold all along the side of each side of my island, each long side of my island. And so I can plug in things anywhere. That was a design by purpose when our house burned about 19 years ago. And we came back in and I got to remodel the kitchen. This was a 1950s house and we updated it to early 2000s. It was burned in 2004. And so my idea was I was not going to have 2 plug-ins in my entire kitchen any longer. That was just ridiculous. So we have plug mold all throughout the kitchen. I would love to sometimes be a kitchen designer and help people with things that maybe they haven't thought about in their kitchen that just make being in the kitchen a lot more pleasant than it generally is with just a plain old kitchen. You can make it with a plain old kitchen, but it sure is a lot of fun when you get things that are handy like that. So when we have gatherings over here and people bring slow cookers or something that needs to be plugged in, they just choose a spot because there's going to be a plug-in that can reach it. Okay, I'm pretty sure we can only fit 2 of these in this electric skillet at a time, and that's just fine. Okay, pressing the mixture down in there as much as I can, kind of get in those little crevices. The cube steak has been tenderized, so there's these little ridges in it, little cuts, if you will, inside the meat. So I'm trying my best to poke these little pieces of saltine down into those cracks to keep this opened up and stay that way. Okay, I'm kind of trying to knock the flour off my fingers just so it won't make a mess, but I don't want the flour in the oil any more than I have to, because those pieces are going to be cooking twice as long as everything else is, because I can take everything else out as a whole, but the pieces kind of float around in there. I don't want any burned pieces. All right, this piece looks like it is ready to turn over, and I want you to see how pretty this is. Okay, give me a minute and I'll pick up that camera and show it to you. Okay, that's what it looks like. If you've ever been leery of making something like chicken fried steak, I'm hoping this encourages you to maybe try it. Now you can cut these in smaller pieces, and they're fun because you can make little chicken fried steak sandwich sliders, or with me, more than likely, with at least some of these, I'm going to make milk gravy and mashed potatoes. Probably cook some kale down like you would turnip greens. Who knows what else we'll have with it. But chicken fried steak is a good comfort food. We have friends that live in Noble, Oklahoma. They own a rather large ranch there. And they live right down the road from a place called Kendall's. And they are known for serving chicken fried steaks. I'm not exaggerating when I say they are as big as a pizza. When they come out, they're on this platter, but the chicken fried steak covers the platter. I've not been there, but I've only seen pictures of it and heard about it. But that's kind of a cool thing. But I think I'd probably be willing to go head-to-head with Kendall's. Not in the size of my chicken fried steak, but probably the flavor. And I don't even know how theirs taste, but I'm that confident in these. Now, spending my high school years in Moore, Oklahoma, I frequented a place called Del Rancho, and they had chicken fried steak sandwiches, and they were so good. And if you were a hefty eater, you could eat an entire chicken fried steak sandwich, but they were rather large. And me, myself, being every bit of 103 pounds dripping wet, I could eat a whole chicken fried steak sandwich. It was that good. And I really didn't even have to be that hungry. They were just that good. All right, I think this other chicken fried steak is ready to turn over. Yep. And this one might be ready to take out. Take that one out and put this one in. I have one left. This is just enough coating for 4 steaks. Now remember, these will be reheated in the oven, so even if they're not completely cooked all the way through, that's actually fine. They're going to be cooked the rest of the way through when they get reheated. Any oil that's left in this pan, I will let it cool down, put in a jar, and that's the oil that I'll use tonight or whenever we eat these to make my milk gravy with, the base of my gravy. So you're not wasting any oil, not wasting too much of anything. I can even use the leftover milk, even though it has an egg in it, I can use that as the milk in my biscuits if I use biscuits, if I make biscuits to go with it. And I probably will. I may have to strain out any of the saltine crumbs, but I can use that. And that, my friends, is how you make a chicken fried steak. I'll show you these two, and hopefully I can show you a final product, maybe with some gravy on the top of them. But for now, that is how you make chicken fried steak. Easy enough, huh? So hopefully I'll show you a picture of this later. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we've made our chicken fried steak. It's in the refrigerator right now. I won't serve this until tomorrow. We're having it for lunch tomorrow. We're having guests over. So what is chicken fried steak without the gravy on the top? So I know I've done a video on sausage gravy, but if you don't have sausage, how do you start milk gravy to put on chicken fried steak? I'm going to show you that right now. So let's turn our burner on, about medium. And this is the grease that I saved, the olive oil, from making the chicken fried steak. Now, that's what it looks like, just plain old grease. But I'm going to put about 1/4 of a cup of it in this pan. And it's got the flour and the crunchy bits in the bottom of it, but that's okay. I'll save the rest of it for some gravy later. But I'm going to put about 1/4 of a cup of it in there. Got a little bit left, and I won't let that go to waste. Other than using it on the chicken fried steak itself, I've also made mashed potatoes. I've made biscuits. So everything calls for gravy. In my opinion, everything calls for gravy. So we're going to have enough gravy to go with everything anybody wants. So we'll let our oil get heated up. And we're going to put 1/4 of a cup of flour in that. This is just plain, this is organic flour, but just plain unbleached flour. And the reason I say unbleached is because I've probably told you before. In case you haven't heard it, I'll say it again. Bleached flour is just that. It's been chemically treated to be bleached. It doesn't make it any whiter. It just makes the shelf life longer. But unfortunately, the agent that they use to bleach flour with is a known carcinogen. Many countries don't even can't put it in their food. They're not allowed because it's so dangerous. But unfortunately, we are not one of those countries, and so we're not protected from that. So protect yourself, at least by unbleached flour. Even if it's conventional flour, look for unbleached. All right, I'm going to put that flour in there. I may need more flour than that, but we'll see. I think I just put too much oil in it, is what it was. I'll take some of that out. Not a problem. Put it right back in the container that it came out of. Add a bit more flour to it. And what we're doing right now is making a roux. It's spelled R-O-U-X, and all it is just a fat and a flour. And when it browns, that is the flour turning brown, just like it would in the oven if you were baking a cake or some cookies. To this, we're going to add about a teaspoon of salt. And a half a teaspoon of black pepper. That's such a glare on that. I'll show it to you over here. Black pepper. Still think I need more flour in that. I must have just put too much oil in there at first. You want about as much flour as you have oil or fat. That looks better. And even if it's not this liquidy, don't panic. Now, normally this would be made in a skillet, but because I have 3 cups of it, I'm going to do it in a saucepan. It's really not that big of an amount, but I also need to pour this in a separate container because I'm not going to serve it today. I'll serve it tomorrow, and I don't want this larger pan going in my refrigerator when it cools off. It just takes up too much room. So there's no hard, fast rules about making gravy in a skillet, which is what I always thought growing up. You have to make gravy in a skillet. That's just how you make it. But that's not true. You can make it in a saucepan. You could make it in a heat-proof cup if you needed to on top of the stove. You just have to have your oil and fat heated up warm enough and add your milk to it, and that's milk gravy. But the salt and pepper help. All right, you want your heat on about medium or a little bit higher than medium. Okay, call me crazy. I'm going to add more flour to it. This is the southern way of doing it. You just eyeball things until they look right. Cooking it until it's brown. Cooking it until it is browning also helps get out that raw flour taste. If you've ever had it, you know what I mean. All right, we're going to pour our milk in. This is just whole milk, and I have about 3.5 cups here. Notice I'm pouring it in slowly, and you can see it thickening up as I'm stirring it. Now don't panic if you've made too much gravy. There's really no such thing as too much gravy, because if you have a biscuit or if you have any piece of meat, this goes with it. You can pour it over scrambled eggs, and it's fabulous. When I was in junior high, my mother had a friend when we lived in a town called Pine Bluff, not too far from here, and her husband put sugar, white sugar, on his gravy. That was just the strangest thing. If I wouldn't have seen it, I wouldn't have believed it. But for some reason, this was a dessert for him. I'm not sure why. I'd never seen that before. Hadn't seen it since. But gravy stores beautifully in the refrigerator. You just simply heat it up. If it's too thick, you add a little bit of milk to it, and you're good to go. All right, that's a great consistency, but it's still cooking, so I'm going to keep adding milk to it. This will thicken as it cools off as well. So when you put it in the refrigerator and it comes out and it looks like a blob of gelatinized gravy, don't panic, because when you heat it up, it'll start getting more thin and runny. Okay, so that's about 3.5 cups of milk. Okay, we'll let that thicken up just a bit. This is also how I test if my ice cream base is thick enough. I whisk it, and when I stop whisking and take the whisk out, if the liquid keeps going around in a circle without my assistance, it's still not thick enough. If it stops and bounces back a little bit, in other words, if the circle keeps going and then when I pull the whisk out, it tends to be like an elastic, it comes back, then it's thick enough. So we'll test this. Yep, bounced back. Okay, this is thick enough. I'm going to turn this burner off. We'll let this cool down. This will get served with our chicken fried steak tomorrow, and I will hopefully remember to video us serving that. So stay tuned.